Reading 91 from the Psychological Commentaries on the Teaching of Gurdjieff and Ouspensky by Dr. Maurice Nicoll, Volume 3, Great Animal House, September 20th, 1947. Note on self-observation, observation of one's mechanicalness. Realizing that your ways are not the only ways, that your views are not the only views, that your opinions are not the only opinions, that your values are not the only things to value, and that yourself are not the only possible yourself. All this is necessary in the path of self-change. Why? Because it weakens personality. But for it to do so, the realization must be genuine, a matter of direct, inner perception. Let us imagine a man called Mr. Amwell. He says, I have observed myself, but I do not see how that helps. I have observed what I say, for example, but I do not yet understand why I should do so. In short, Mr. Amwell, who I hope is actually an imaginary person, or otherwise in these days I shall no doubt be liable for libel. I say, Mr. Amwell does not realize what idea lies behind the work teaching concerning self-observation. He does not see why it is necessary. No doubt he has never said to himself, now I wish to change this or that in myself. He does not see why he should observe himself. Now the work says, for instance, that self-observation is a method of self-change. It says this quite early. Mr. Amwell says he observes himself and cites as an example that he observes what he says but does not see why he should. He says it makes no difference to him. He adds that it does not change him in any way, and so he cannot see why he should observe himself. Clearly he hints that it is a waste of time. Let us suppose a conversation is held with him by the work itself. The work says to him, I notice, Mr. Amwell, that whenever Tennyson is mentioned, you say he was no good as a poet. Mr. Amwell says, yes, that is exactly what I always say. The work then asks him, you dislike hard-boiled eggs, I believe? Mr. Amwell says, yes, I always tell people that. It is quite true. The work then asks him various similar questions to which Mr. Amwell replies in a similar manner. Maybe there might be one resembling Mr. Amwell, who, candidly understanding himself, would add that he is a little aware that he does say the same things over and over again, and may bore people. But even so, there is a considerable step between such a confession and the deeper recognition that he is mechanical. He is fixed, crystallized, but does not see it. A man, a woman can be very satisfied with their mechanicalness, not because they see it as mechanicalness, but because they see it as their own intelligent, conscious selves. Long before they get to opening their lips, their audience knows exactly what gramophone record is going to utter such solemn truths as that they dislike Tennyson or hard-boiled eggs. Now, one of the first things taught in this work is the necessity for realizing one's own mechanicalness through uncritical self-observation. A man, a woman, very early can become almost completely mechanical. They say the same things over and over again. They feel the same feelings. They do the same things. And it is almost as if they dislike the very idea that they should not continue to be such machines, such bits of sheer mechanicalness, and awaken from their sleep. They are always upset by the same events. They are always prejudiced towards the same people. They like or dislike almost automatically, and however it may seem outwardly, if anyone touches them beneath the skin, there is found a calm self-esteem that is apparently the explanation of their mechanicalness. That is, beneath the surface, they strongly approve of themselves, however they apologize for themselves. Here, there is a lack of connection, which results in a certain psychological blindness. For example, if a person easily says he or she is no good, it means often that it masks something quite different, such as conceit. There is a lack of connection due to a lack of long and sincere observation. The man, the woman, do not see what they are like on both sides, right and left. They live in compensatory pictures, often really too modest to be tolerable to others who sense their other side, which is contradictory. All this, of course, applies in very complex ways to all of us, namely, these inner and outer contradictions. A man may seem outwardly conceited and boastful, and within himself feels poor and inadequate, and vice versa. But the opposites are mixed in us in a very strange way. Now, a man should observe what he observes. To observe is difficult. It needs a conscious effort. You cannot observe yourself mechanically. That certainly will change nothing. But in such a case, if you become cleverer, you will begin to observe that you always observe only 2 or 3 things over and over again. This will not separate you from your mechanical self, for has not observation now become a very part of your mechanical self? The function of observing I is to move inwards more and more deeply, so that more and more of yourself can be seen by it. If observing I remains on the surface of yourself, it cannot perform its real task, which is to make a man more and more objective to himself, more and more aware of what he has hitherto calmly taken as himself. If self-observation is truly carried out, and not blocked by some strong attitude or picture that the man or woman cannot observe, then it leads to seeing bits of one's life and behavior altogether. This is called taking photographs of oneself. One has, it was once said, to take a number of full-plate photographs of oneself and keep them in an album and often look at them. Yes, this will certainly begin to change you. It will change the typical feeling of our I that you reside in, the usual sense of yourself, for unless that is altered, nothing can alter. To return to Mr. Amwell, one wonders if, for instance, he observes not only what he says, but, let me say, his vanity, negative states, suspicions, jealousies, laziness, his queer pictures of himself, his imitated attitudes, his fixed opinions, his buffers, his internal considering, or indeed anything that the work teaches him to observe. If not, he will have no real photographs of himself. His album will be empty. Also, he will never reach the state possible for all who genuinely work, who genuinely value and apply the work to themselves, namely, the state in which it is given to one sometimes to stand aside internally, to be separated, and to watch the stream of moods, passion, negative thoughts, worries, hatreds, depressions, and bitterness, with which one is usually wholly identified. So he or she will not be able to understand, for example, the following quotation I give you from a recent letter. Lying in bed in the morning, I saw thoughts coming in, jealous thoughts, anxious thoughts, sad thoughts, self-pitying thoughts, which followed one another, and seemed to pass through my mind, and then went out again, and they were nothing to do with me at all. Now, to have this experience means that you begin to realize what is inner freedom. You have heard it sometimes said that this work is to give inner freedom. But if a man cannot understand what self-observation is, or if he has always identified himself with everything he has observed, if he has always said I to it, how can he ever reach the state illustrated in the above quotation? Try to see what is meant here for yourselves.